This video features 5 creepy stories that happen to people working the night shift. Before we get to the video, if you like this kind of content and want more of it, you can support me by subscribing to the channel. Ready for the stories. Scary Highlights presents. Oh man, I hate recalling this story. I work night shift at a rehab facility. We have a protected gate with a camera looking down from above and one of those doorbell cameras. In the office, the camera monitor is on one wall and the doorbell monitor is on another. I was doing some paperwork and see this guy walk past, stop for a few seconds, then slowly turned around, walked back, and stared up at the camera. And he kept staring. The facility is in a rough neighborhood, so I'm fairly used to folks hanging out around the gate and usually ignore it. But the way he was staring was off-putting, like his eyes and expression were hollow and dead, almost as if he were in deep thought about something horrible. I was pretty sure he was zonked on synthetics. I used the intercom to see if he was okay, but he just kept staring directly at the camera. We have a rule. If it's not hurt or trying to come through the fence, just let it be. No sense in engaging needlessly with somebody potentially hostile or fucking with the locals. Y'all, he stood there and stared at that camera for 2 hours. That same dead-eyed expression staring right at me. I did a round and came back to find him gone, which only creeped me out more. Worked night shift at a large grocery store, one that wasn't open overnight but had a skeleton crew to work the loads and do prep and clean. I worked near the entrance large glass doors, but visually blocked off from my vantage point. Around 3 a.m. I hear knocking on the doors. This isn't completely uncalled for. Usually it's someone coming in for an early shift but didn't have a key card. Sometimes it's someone's food delivery. Or sometimes a customer who thinks we are open despite clearly being closed. I approach the door. It's a man that I don't recognize, wet from the rain. He looks normal enough, but something about him unnerved me. He had that vibe to him. You know the one, where it seems like maybe they're on their way to becoming a full-blown meth head. But for now, they still manage to give the appearance of functionality. He was holding his shit together just enough to appear normal, but the edges were definitely shaky. Anyway, without unlocking the door, I announced that the store was closed. He told me that he just needed my help. His car had broken down in the parking lot and he needed a boost. I didn't drive, so I told him I couldn't help him. I should have walked away there, but he was out in the rain and I did legitimately feel bad. So I told him I would see if anyone of our few crew did drive. I did find someone who was willing to help and got the night crew manager involved as well. We went out. Turns out he was parked a bit off from the entrance in a fairly secluded spot, and he had a lady with him. There was a similar vibe with her, almost but not exactly normal. It didn't click right away, but I figured they had been hooking up in the car in the parking lot, maybe left the radio or lights on and drained the battery. To me, that explained the weird, unnerving feeling. They either felt ashamed or guilty, and it was showing through. Anyway, my coworker goes over to help give them a boost. The manager and I stay out there with him nearby, watching. The 2 lovebirds kept peeking over at us a bit uncomfortably. After a few moments, the coworker returns from the car and hurries us back inside. We don't see them drive off, which seems odd. We get inside, lock up again, and then the coworker thanks us for staying out there with him and not leaving him alone with them. He also caught on to the unnerving air about them, and it made him worried. What worried him more was when it also turned out that there was nothing wrong with their car. He used to work nights at a Home Depot. There was one time where for a week or so our store stayed open 24 hours. For the most part, this wasn't really a problem. Typically, nobody comes shopping for home improvement items at 2 in the morning, except that one couple that came looking for marble countertops at 1:30 in the morning, and the woman was wearing a nice dress. I guess there was also that one young lady who came looking for a toilet paper roll holder a little after midnight. I had just gotten off my first break, and she was wearing jorts and one of those white with black belt stereotypical karate outfits. She was oddly specific about which roll holder to get, too. But the real story lies within the insulation. It was nearing 3 in the morning, and me and another guy were stocking insulation, as well as fixing the bays and some such maintenance. A bunch of big R-30s had fallen in their bay, and while I was sorting through them, a fucking hand came out of the mess and grabbed my arm. I lost my mind enough for not only the guy I was working with to freak out, but also for my boss, who was across the store, to come check out the commotion. Turns out a homeless drunkard had come into the store at some point, and I can only assume before the night crew showed up, and had made a nest in the insulation where he fell asleep. The dude was in bad shape too, like far gone into whatever inebriation that we had to call the police to remove him. I was always a little more cautious around the insulation for at least the time the store stayed open 24 hours. It was 3 a.m., popular Canadian coffee shop. There is one old baker in the back that rarely interacts with me past a dirty joke or a dirtier ditty from his Navy days. Other than that, I'm alone. Not another soul around the area, and I expect it to remain so for at least an hour yet. I'm boxing up the day-olds for the homeless shelter when I swear I see something out of the corner of my eye. It's behind me. I turn, then look down. There's a small child standing there, a native little toddler with a faux wahawk staring at me intensely. I'm struck dumb with how absurd the situation is. How did he get behind the counter? I didn't hear the door open or see him come through the counter. I scan the storefront. No one. I yell for the baker in case he has a friend or something visiting that lost their kid. He comes over and, like me, does a double take at the kid and is baffled. Kid starts muttering incoherently. I get him a glass of water and a donut hole, and the baker runs out of the store to do a perimeter of the block. I call the non-emergency line and explain, I have a little kid with no parents. I can't get any information from the boy, just mumbles I can't make out. Police arrive. Baker comes back, says that he can't find anyone else in the streets. The guy from the 24/7 corner store said he'll keep an eye out. Police try to speak to the kid and also get nothing but mutterings and half-hearted gestures. They take him away. I see them again for their morning coffee, and they told me the little guy walked several kilometers from the nearest reservation in the dead of night to my store. He had got into his parents' medicine cabinet and just walked out of the house. I'm floored. It must have taken that poor baby Howers to get to me. Seeing him behind me like that in the dead of the night still shakes me. Spooked me more than the guy that threw a pot of coffee at me, the woman that tried to stab me with a plastic spoon because I refused to give her a metal one, and the dude that waited around for 4 hours hoping to catch me alone so he could teach me a lesson since I didn't have the flavor of bagel he wanted. I was once staying late doing some scenic painting in a college campus theater. It was late, pitch black dark outside, and very quiet in the building. A few of us were up on the stage, not really talking, just taking care of business, when suddenly I saw out of the corner of my eye something go very quickly by the open door to the lobby. Then it went by again, and I actually saw what it was. A guy with long hair, wearing pajamas, and no socks or shoes. He was tiptoeing in a very exaggerated way, pulling his knees up very high and grinning. It sounds kind of funny, but it was creepy as hell. We all made eye contact, and one of the other painters was just about to go shut the door when the dude walked right in. He stood there staring at us for a full minute. You could have heard a pin drop. He threw his arms out to the sides dramatically and said, "I am your Savior, Jesus Christ." No one responded, and he eventually walked out. I guess he was hoping to get more of a reaction. The door was promptly shut and locked behind him, and security called. They were not impressed. Turns out that he was a patient at some sort of group home nearby and had done this multiple times. I still get creeped out to this day if I'm working in a theater at night, though.